Hey everybody, it's Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich for SkiSoutheast.com. Well, we're in a store for another warm-up this week, but there's some good news. I'm starting to detect that pattern flip coming up, maybe Christmas or post-Christmas time frame. Let's get right to the details. So we'll start with some of the bad news first. Warm week ahead, really mild temperatures all the way until Saturday, and then Sunday, some colder air moves into the eastern half of the country, and it starts to get cold again. So we've got a week of warm air, but by the time we get to the weekend, I do see much colder air moving into the eastern half of the country, which is good news. As we take a look at the long-range futurecast, you'll see that front coming through on Saturday. So it's all warm before the system gets here, but you can see there will be likely a little bit of wintry weather. I'm not going to say a ton, but the fact that we've got a little bit of a northwest flow there, that's a little bit of a good sign. So maybe we'll get a little bit of snow out of that, especially for our Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland resorts. But as we go into early next week, I've been watching this storm for a couple days now, and depending on the global guidance you look at, this is next Tuesday, by the way, so basically a week from today, some kind of low here. Depending on the amount of cold air, I think there is going to be some pretty good snow on this northwest side. Now, does it get tugged down into the central Appalachians? Kind of tough to tell right now, but that's a storm to watch. Either way, it is going to usher in some northwest flow on the backside there briefly and then kind of push out. The overall snowfall forecast isn't overly impressive. You look at these totals through the middle of next week, and again, you're looking at pretty minor amounts there. So when I show you the snowfall forecast, it's not the greatest in the world this week. As we mentioned, it's pretty puny. I mean, you look at this. No snowmaking really much of this week. After this weekend, there was some good snowmaking and early on, but by Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, might be a little opportunity up towards Snowshoe and Wisp and Timberline and Canadian Valley, those areas briefly, but not a whole lot. So that's kind of, you got to get through this week before we see the pattern change. So speaking of that pattern change, let's talk about that because this is a pretty interesting setup. So I'm going to start with the current warm-up. You see the red in the east. I don't think you have to be a meteorologist to figure out what's going on there. But as we go into the future, let's go all the way until past Christmas. So I'm going to stop this on Christmas Day. First thing you notice here is kind of mild here in the southeast, but we've got a big ridge over parts of Alaska. Trough beginning to dig out west. Boy, the western ski resorts are getting absolutely clobbered in the next week and 2-week period. But let's go longer range. I want to go all the way out to after Christmas. So this is the 26th, 27th. I'm going to stop this on the last day, the 28th. So right away it looks, Brad, that doesn't look all that great. But here's what I'm watching. You see this up here, this ridge over Greenland? If you follow a lot of long-range forecasting, one of the things that you notice when we see certain parameters like negative NAO, which is a North Atlantic oscillation, or a negative Arctic oscillation, when we start to see blocking over Greenland, this tends to force cold air down the east coast. And while this looks like the warm is centered over Texas, there are hints here of some of this cold air trying to sneak into the eastern half of the country. And it's just not the European ensembles. We're seeing this a lot in the GFS and some of the other long-range stuff. And then when you look at the Arctic oscillation, so this is the 46-day ensemble forecast of the Arctic oscillation from the European model. Without having to know a whole lot about the meteorology here, when it's negative, we tend to get better chances of cold and snow. So if you look, it was all positive here for most of December, and then starting around the 22nd, it starts to dip, and then after the 26th, it stays consistently pretty much below zero. So that's good. When we see negative Arctic oscillations and NAOs, that's a better sign. The fact that it lasts into January, I would expect there's always a little delay sometimes in these things. So early January, late December, I think that's going to be a really hot period for cold air. I say hot, a really good period for snow and cold for the eastern half of the country. So that's something I'm keeping a close eye on. So even though it's warm this week, and it's been on again, off again, warm for most of December, there are finally now signs of things in the Arctic and this trough ridge setup where we're going to see this blocking in the North Atlantic, which should eventually push cold air into the eastern U.S. And again, when this pattern is this warm now, it's going to flip at some point. Rarely, even in a warm winter, it doesn't stay consistently warm the whole time. We may get 2-3 weeks of warm, but it does flip, and that flip looks to be happening after Christmas into the first of the year. So think snow. We'll get through this record warmth this week because trust me, things are about to change as we go towards the later half of the month.